It was a PS3 game, Xbox 360, but they brought out the definitive version when those systems launched, which is a sly code way of saying, hey, this is the PC version running on high settings instead of low. It's Ultra. We're going to sell it again. Welcome back to Cartridge Based Radio. I'm Donald, once again joined by Brad.
Hello.
Brad, we are quickly coming to the close of our Fall of 97 celebration, and we've had good games, innovative games, and we haven't really had a game that I would classify as hot garbage in this list, so let's fix that. What do you say?
All right, let's talk about San Francisco Rush then, because that game's trash.
Holy cow. We have questions that probably will never have answers. Can you please tell us about this steaming turd?
Okay, San Francisco Rush was an arcade game. Pretty popular one, although arcades were sort of dying out by this time. But 1996 for the arcade. It was very cool because it had a force feedback steering wheel. It was a sit-in cabinet that you would actually sit in, as you might assume from the name, and had a steering wheel and gas pedals and all that. And it was a force feedback steering wheel, so every time you hit a bump or something, it would jolt. The harder you were trying to turn, there'd be more resistance. It's pretty neat technology for the late 90s. And on top of that, it had a big subwoofer that was underneath the seat. So anytime there was a low noise, you'd feel it through your whole body. So that was the arcade version. It was kind of neat, decent arcade game. And they decided to port it out to consoles. And the PlayStation version got delayed. But the N64 version came out October, November 97, sort of later in the year. And it got great reviews from more than a few publications, and it was kind of a disappointment, I think, for a lot of people, because it does not live up to its arcade heritage or those great reviews, I would say.
It certainly does not. The exposure I had to this game growing up was the arcade version, and I did enjoy San Francisco Rush in the arcade. You had the jumping off hills, which was pretty thrilling. You had great vistas and views as you drove, like crossing the Golden Gate Bridge while it was foggy and not being able to see what was on the other side. That was impressive. And it had good tracks. And I had fond memories of it. And then we had a list of 5 games we were going to do for the wrap up.
Yeah.
And then we were like, oh, we do not have time to play 5 different games for this wrap up. So we decided to just pick one, and we really hadn't done a pure racing game. We did Awesome Crime and Felony 1179, but we wanted a pure racing game. And I had no idea this N64 port was so terrible. I mean, next level terrible.
If you're a fan of San Francisco Rush on the Nintendo 64 for some reason, just stop the show now. Come back next week, because we're just dragging this game out behind our offices, and we're going to kick it for a while and then throw it in the dumpster.
And then light the dumpster on fire.
And then put the fire out with used cat litter. This is how we feel about San Francisco Rush.
San Francisco Rush for the N64 is one of the most garbage games I have ever played in my life. And I have played a lot of games in my life I thought were bad. The cars don't have tires. You are a block sliding across the ground, making vroom vroom noises.
To be fair, the fact that the cars don't have tires sort of explains why they don't turn, which is kind of a big deal for a driving game.
Okay, I figured out this problem about my third race in. You have to let off the accelerator and tap the brake as you turn to get the tires to actually move like a car would. But then when you hit a certain degree of angle, your car just starts sliding to the left or the right, like it has left gravity and said, screw you. And it's magnetically attracted to every single wall you can possibly find.
You know, it's an interesting concept because, like, if you play a game like Gran Turismo or Forza or something that's a simulator, it's normal to have to, like, slow down before a turn. You know, that's the game, is realistic driving, enter the turn slow, come out of them fast. It's not what you expect from, like, a game where a school bus is just as fast as a Pontiac Firebird and you're jumping over buildings in them. Like, you don't expect super attempt at realism physics where you have to, like, slow down and take your turn strategically for a game like that. And it's not like they pulled it off well. I don't think it was what they were going for, but either way, it sucks.
I think this issue of the game comes from its arcade roots because it's still got the timed gates in it. Because when you go out and you buy a cartridge, what you want is the pressure to lose because all the other cars were hitting you and caused you to explode. You couldn't turn properly because someone didn't go to how to make a car turn class in programming college. Exploding for just driving, apparently. Just every once in a while you get too close to a building and it's like, oh, I should just explode. But after you explode, you can keep driving if you really want to. If you hold down the accelerator, your weird-looking charcoal car will keep moving down the track slowly until you let off the accelerator. Like, there was no sort of quality assurance done to this title.
You know, if this game was called, like, Ukraine Rush and you were just, like, driving around the Ukraine, I would expect the cars to just explode for no good reason. But this San Francisco, and, you know, I've been there, and cars don't just randomly explode all the time.
I have a question about San Francisco since you've been there.
Yeah.
Does it have trouble rendering like a foot and a half in front of your eyes? Much like San Francisco Rush for the N64.
San Francisco, the city, is like sort of like this like mystical realm where the city is created on the fly around you in like a 1 foot radius. So like San Francisco doesn't exist more than 2 feet in front of you at any given time.
I have a feeling it came to the N64 first because like we don't even have to deal with making fog effects because the hardware naturally just doesn't render anything. So we can, oh, look at the foggy city you're in. And the problem is there are some hard turns in this game that don't render until you're about 40 seconds too late to get into your braking.
Or like be in the correct line to make that turn.
For some reason, when you're selecting a car, it makes the most awful sound effects on the planet. And some voice is like, too dangerous.
There isn't a car you can select that doesn't make annoying sounds. Like, the easiest car to drive makes like a truck backing up noise. Like, beep, beep, beep. If you go to the intermediate cars, it keeps that beeping, but it adds a car alarm onto it. And then if you go to the really hard to drive cars, it's those noises plus a guy going, "It's dangerous!" over and over and over.
And then when you select your cars, they recorded someone smashing pots and pans together. I don't remember that in the arcade version. Like, man, we got some extra money to record these voice clips and sound effects. What should we do? I know. Let's antagonize the player into wanting to turn off this cartridge and throw it in the street.
The incredible thing to me is that, you know, you have these different car choices, and it's like a BMW and like a Volkswagen Bug. One of them's like a Lamborghini, and then like another one's like a Pontiac Firebird. So they kind of got the range of like luxury car, old car, exotic car, and like kind of like budget level sporty car, and some other things in between. I think in addition to the Bug, there's also like a minibus. You know, a lot of stuff like that. They all drive like the same speed. You know, if you've ever just wanted to sit down and see a race where all the cars were as fast as a minibus, but maybe looked cooler, I mean, San Francisco Rush is your game, man.
And if you feel like you're losing, dear listener, I don't want you to worry too bad about it, because if you get far enough behind, your opponents will come to a complete stop on the track and wait for you to pass them, then about 20 seconds later, just blow by you.
This is like playing against somebody who's just like so much better than you, and he's just taunting you. He's like, all right, I'm gonna stop now and let you get ahead of me, and then I'm just gonna blow right by you again.
But it's not one person who's taunting you, it's the entire other set of 7 cars you're racing against. Like, oh, we'll just stop because apparently he can't drive a car. And there's only one track that I could successfully repeatedly complete in that game, and that was like the beginner one with the Golden Gate Bridge. The others add in these like insane hairpins and then multiple paths you can take. None of it's set up to actually function like driving a car would. So doing these hard turns and trying to find the paths to these other ways you can go is just frustratingly impossible. And if you accidentally tap forward on your thumbstick, your car goes flying through the air up the track and brings you to a dead stop for you to... It's a quick reset, I guess.
Yeah.
So if you're getting in trouble, you can just reset, but it eats your time. They didn't learn from Mario Kart. Make you blink and put you back on the track. Don't try to do anything fancy.
The risk-reward ratio for all the shortcuts in this game is just so out of whack. Like, the shortcuts are really hard. You know, you'll see it and you'll think, oh, cool, I see it. That must be the hardest part of doing the shortcut is just, like, finding it. You know, I found a secret. And you'll go, like, down this tunnel and you're like, this isn't so bad. And then there'll be, like, a jump right before a turn into a wall. And then if you make that, like, you'll have to, like, do a quick, like, another 90-degree turn into a jump. And, like, there's just so many ways on these shortcuts to crash and end up in last place. And if you pull off the whole shortcut successfully, you'll shave like 1/10 of a second off your time.
But don't worry, your opponents are sitting there waiting for you when you get out of the shortcut because they don't want you to feel bad. Another thing the developers probably didn't want you to feel bad about was the hot music in San Francisco Rush, which I'm convinced was a 40-second little jingle that's on loop.
Yeah, the music that you get while you're driving is horrible. The music on the start screen when you first start the game is terrible. The one where it's just like, rush! That's awful. Having said that, did you manage to get a high score? Because I'll tell you, as hard as this game is to like do well at, I finished 8th place out of 8 in a race. I don't think I made all my checkpoints. I don't think I got to the end of the race. I still got the number 1 lap for that track. So, like, the other 7 contestants somehow had a worse lap time than me, despite finishing ahead of me. But I got the number 1 time for that track, and it plays the greatest song I've ever heard in my life. Did you get the What's Your Name song?
Yes, I did get the What's Your Name song. Now that I think about on the Golden Gate Bridge one, and I just kept hitting the A button as fast as I possibly could to get out of what I just experienced.
You probably didn't even get to the part where he just starts reading off the alphabet because he's run out of... You know, the only lyrics he wrote was, "What's your name?" And then after like 10 seconds of repeating that, he's just like, A, B, C. He's just like,
what?
Nothing nasty now. I think I'm actually gonna get sound clips from this game so that every time I get a text message, my phone just goes, nothing nasty now.
So someone said, hey, we have this cow turd. Hand me some whipped cream. We're going to read the alphabet. That's edge. One thing I do appreciate about this game, because I think I should say at least one nice thing about it, besides the fact you can turn it off. They actually kind of tried to build a city and then just weave different tracks through it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I believe other racing games have borrowed that system from them, and then Burnout Paradise is like, you just can drive anywhere. Figure out how to do the race yourself. Burnout Paradise is what I actually hold this game against, which is probably not fair, because Burnout Paradise is my favorite race game of all time. This is not Burnout Paradise.
No. The word paradise has no business being anywhere within 100 miles of this game.
No, this game is the equivalent of, I don't know, hell.
They might as well have like taken Doomguy and put him in this game because this game is hell.
him driving his car.
Making that frowny skull. I'm playing San Francisco Rush, and this is the face I make.
This is worse than that time I went to hell and fought demons.
I am Doomguy.
Rest in peace, Doomguy. It looks bad. It plays bad. It sounds bad. It controls bad.
It's poorly designed. Everything about this game seems like it was actually just made to irritate the player. Like, I loaded it up, and, like, there's, like, a little intro thing where it just shows, like, some cars jumping or whatever, and it's like, rush! So I hit start, and it ignored that, and it goes right to, like, a demo race. So I keep hitting start, and it cuts out of the demo race, and it goes back to the cars jumping. I'm like, okay, it's gonna, like, bring me to the menu. And then it goes back to the demo race. Like, I can't even, like, get the game started without it angering me.
It's like, yo, do you want to see the computer drive these cars around this track? Because it's the only time you're going to see this track driven in any way, shape, or form that looks like cars maneuvering. Here's the demo.
Yeah, how come all the AI drivers got cars with steering wheels in them?
You have like 2 ropes attached to your front axle, and it comes in through holes on the floor, and you're just pulling, trying to get your car to work. I think you got like one of those soapbox racers. It's the only way I can describe it. So the N64 version is the hottest garbage, and the arcade version is a decent, fun game.
Yeah.
But you told me, and this is impossible, there's no way I can believe this, the PlayStation 1 version is worse than the N64 version?
Yeah, PlayStation 1 version got delayed for a while, and when it finally came out, this was back in the magazine days. You know, it was kind of pre-internet, or at least like pre-like anything worthwhile on the internet. So to get a game reviewed, you had to like send a copy to magazines like about a month before you were going to release it so they could review it and publish it and everything. This was one of those games that they didn't do that. Magazines had to go to the store and buy their own copies and like put their reviews out like 2 months after the game was released because of, you know, how long it takes to play it and write a review and then get it published. So it was one of those ones where they're like trying to like build in an advantage. And it was because the game was just horrendous. As bad as the N64 one is, this one, low frame rates, missing textures. I'd say worse control, but I guess probably just about the same control. The other way you could look at it is it coming out, I don't know, maybe it was 6 months, maybe 9 months after the N64 one, was maybe enough time for the Kool-Aid to wear off, and the reviewers just are like, oh wait, this game's actually terrible. It's too late to fix our N64 reviews, but at least we can take it out on the PlayStation version.
The only way I could imagine that this game is worse on the PlayStation is if it somehow fired your memory card out of the system and hit you in the left eye while you're playing. Is that what it would do? Like physically assault you.
You remember in the Nintendo days, they had the Nintendo Seal of Quality, and then like you'd play terrible games on the Nintendo, and you're like, well, how did this get a Seal of Quality? Like the Seal of Quality basically just says like this game won't like explode and like put like molten shrapnel into your body. And I don't think San Francisco Rush on the PlayStation even holds up to that low standard. If you put that game in your PlayStation and load it up, it summons a demon. And, like, then you have to fight a demon in your living room.
Don't worry, I got this guy. Thanks, Doomguy. So, it has 5 tracks of pain and suffering. You won't complete 4 of them?
Yeah, I think that's actually 2 bonus tracks over the arcade version. They might have like put out like a arcade version 2 or something like that with bonus stuff. But, you know, it's like a step up. Like they wanted to give you more terrible, terrible content. So more tracks.
So they're like, man, this port needs to have more content to be worth your money. I hate to bring reviewers into this, but was the expectation so low for N64 games at the time? They're like, wow, this is amazing because we actually got a video game on our console.
GoldenEye had just come out like a couple months earlier.
Then there is no excuse for this.
The one magazine that I kind of trusted the most at that time was a little rag called Ultra Game Players that was both hilarious and their reviews generally agreed with my tastes. San Francisco Rush got reviewed by their chief editor, Bill Donahue. The sub-headline, it was like San Francisco Rush, you know, big title on the page. Sub-headline, woohoo! woohoo. Like, I think it might have just been like multiple woohoos. And he loved it. I think he gave it like a 98 out of 100 or something really high. If you're out there listening 20 years later, Bill Donahue, you decide to fire up this podcast, I want you to come on this show and defend yourself for that review, because you lied to me. I not only spent money on San Francisco Rush, but I spent a lot of time on it because I was convinced that somewhere in this was a fun game. Because like him and like other magazines, EGM, Game Fan, like I was told that there was a fun game in this cartridge somewhere. And I was lied to.
Maybe they all got together, got some hockey sticks, and played some office hockey with the cartridge. And they're like, this game is fun!
They just like dodgeballed each other with it. Like somebody would come into the office and they just get pegged with a copy of San Francisco Rush. And it's like, this game's the best. Look at Mike Salmon. He's got a concussion now. This game rules. I'm just gonna keep dropping names of like game reviewers from 20 years ago.
Hey guys, I somehow got in the water cooler. Isn't that awesome? This game rules!
It's like drop it out of a high-story window, lands on somebody's head. San Francisco Rush!
Yeah, I mean, you could argue the best thing that came out of this was that somebody had to be in the factory that put the cartridge together, so they got paid and they fed their families. That's the only upside of San Francisco Rush on the N64 existing.
The only good thing that comes in that box is the epilepsy warning, because maybe if by some random chance it's the only game you ever bought and you had undiagnosed epilepsy, you might have learned about that and it might have like saved your life. That is the only way I can think of San Francisco Rush ever doing anything good ever.
If you had like a table with one leg that's shorter, you could use that cartridge to shore it up.
No, you know what? Go find an old copy of Madden. Somebody might look down at your floor and see it. Like they might drop something off the table and go to get it and be like, oh, I almost touched San Francisco Rush.
Maybe when people came to your door to sell you a vacuum cleaner, they're like, may I speak to whoever's in charge of the house? You're like, excuse me, they're playing San Francisco Rush. And that salesman would be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never come back later.
If you have a friend that you're trying to not be friends with anymore, you could just call them up and be like, hey, you want to play some San Francisco Rush? And then you won't have to like hang out with them.
I was playing this earlier today, and I told my wife I was thinking about texting you and just quitting the show.
This game actually did cost me a friend, besides you almost quitting the show. Like, I had a friend who wasn't somebody I hung out with a lot, but it was almost like maybe they were trying to, like reach out and like start a friendship or something. He invited me over to play GoldenEye at his house. I'm like, that sounds cool. And then like, I had just bought like a week earlier this hot new game, San Francisco Rush, that I was convinced somewhere in there was a fun game. I'm like, maybe the multiplayer is where it's at. So like, I brought San Francisco Rush over to his house and like we played GoldenEye for a while. I'm like, now check this game out because it's rad. And like we played that, and then I never got invited over to his house to play GoldenEye ever again.
Now all I can picture is sad 19-year-old Brad standing out in the rain in Buffalo, holding his copy of San Francisco Rush and saying, why don't I have friends, San Francisco Rush? And it's like, I'm your only friend.
I'll always be your only friend. That is 100% accurate, except that like this game came out in October, so it was snow in Buffalo by then.
I don't know how the East Coast works. Isn't it like high tide and wind? That's the seasons over there?
Yep, those are 2 seasons, high tide and wind.
I've been playing San Francisco Rush for 3 days. I am not responsible for the words I say on this show. My brain has been abused by this pile of steaming hot poo.
The easiest way to understand weather on the East Coast, at least in Buffalo, is, the beginning of Empire Strikes Back, where they're on Hoth, and like Luke just like is out in it overnight, and they're like, he must be dead because he was on Hoth overnight. That's Buffalo, like for 9 months out of the year.
Oh.
Yeah, then it turns like 90 degrees and muggy for 3 months, and everybody's like, why is this happening?
I'm starting to understand why you left, because that sounds miserable. You're like always asleep in a tauntaun. That's gotta be gross.
Yeah, and then, July hits and it's 80 degrees, and people are like, we've offended the corn god. Look at what he's done to our snow.
That has to be bad if it raises temperature that fast with that much snow on the ground.
Oh, it's awesome for the roads. They love it.
So people in Buffalo drive boats. That's what I get from this. Why don't we have Buffalo Rush, where you drive boats down the street?
Oh my god, that would be the saddest game. Like, you're just going by an abandoned steel mill, and then you pass a strip club where the strippers don't even take off all their clothes, and you make a right down past the bingo hall to the flea market, and you're in a rusted out 1987 Chevy Caprice. Oh my god, I so want to play Buffalo Rush.
You pass Big Lou's Famous Pizza, and he's the only pizza place in town just because he couldn't make it in New York.
There's just a school that's on fire for no reason. You get to the lake, and all these dead fish just wash up on the road and makes the road slippery.
A big banner on the screen pops up. You got hit with a hypodermic needle from the lake. Oh no!
There's just, since the N64 couldn't draw more than 10 feet in front of you, there's just all these clouds of industrial smoke surrounding you, just smog. See, that game would be awesome. 4 out of 6 tracks would be snow tracks, obviously.
And it's so much snow you can't actually tell where you are, so you can just kind of free roam. And every once in a while, give you some bonus time.
You can go to the airport and hit a sweet jump and go over the Bills' plane as they're coming back from losing the Super Bowl.
Press B to say, good job, guys.
Press A to throw rocks at their plane.
So, I believe we should have to, as a rule, try to say 3 nice things about San Francisco Rush.
Okay.
So people don't think we're totally mean. So, I'm going to say one nice thing about San Francisco Rush. It has a pretty good radio tower in it that you drive around.
Okay. So there's that. I'm going to say that the What's Your Name song is just cheesy but awesome. I'm a big fan of that song.
And I'm going to say if you don't know how to pronounce Rush, this game will repeatedly tell you how to say Rush.
Yeah, that's actually, if you had a kid and they were having trouble pronouncing Rush, if you're just hey kid, that's mine, who's the greatest band ever? And they're I don't know how to say it. And you can just play San Francisco Rush for them, and then they'll learn how to say Rush.
And then after they play it and see how horrible it is, they're like, REO Speedwagon. No!
San Francisco REO Speedwagon.
It's just hard to process in my brain how this game came out, and they took money from children thinking this was going to be a port of their favorite arcade racing game, San Francisco Rush. And get home and just the hopelessness and despair. How many people quit playing video games after playing the N64 San Francisco Rush is what I want to know.
Probably more than a few. I'm wondering how many people stopped trusting game reviewers after they bought San Francisco Rush on the recommendations of so many magazines around that time. The game magazine publishing industry collapsed within a few years, and everybody's well, the internet. But I think it was San Francisco Rush just eroded everybody's faith.
Oddly enough, I can tell you the moment I stopped trusting game reviews. Chrono Cross.
Did not like Chrono Cross.
Everyone was like, Chrono Cross is amazing. It's the perfect sequel to Chrono Trigger. GameSpot gave it a 10. This is the perfect game.
GameSpot's the one that got caught taking bribes, right? How are they still... How? How is that still a thing that exists? You give, what was it, Kane and Lynch? Or some horrible game. They advertise all over your site. You give them a great review. You get caught. Everybody knows that, you're the site that is for sale.
No. They gave it a bad review. And then they fired that editor and re-reviewed it as a great game.
Ah.
And everyone was like, wait a minute.
So, do people just read GameSpot and they're like, all right, as long as I read the review the day of before they fire the guy in retaliation, I know what I'm reading is accurate.
GameSpot is great for you're what games are coming out on Xbox Game for Gold or PlayStation Plus? oh, here's a convenient list that tells me what those are. And then you leave GameSpot. I think that's all they're good for. I haven't been there for years since they betrayed me with Chrono Cross.
I played hockey with a guy who got like super into Chrono Cross, and that game had like, I don't know, 13 endings or something stupid, but for some reason we kept exaggerating and was like, oh, he stopped coming to hockey after a while. I think he just got bored of it, but we're like, yeah, Mike's trying to get the 42nd ending to Chrono Cross, and that's why he's not here this week. And then we decided that he did get it, and when you get the 42nd ending, like a portal opens up and you become part of the game and you're a playable character, and that was what happened to him.
I've been troned
into my favorite game. Like, if I got troned into Skyrim, I'd be fine with that, except I'd probably be a peasant and be killed shortly thereafter.
The hero would just run by and whack you with a warhammer, and you'd die in the first 10 minutes.
This sword gets more powerful if I kill innocent people with it.
This is a weird modifier to have on this weapon, Jack. People will love it, trust me.
Thanks for doing me that favor, Dragonborn. I only did it because I get a bonus for murdering my friends.
Are we friends now? Of course, Dragonborn. Hee hee. Probably should veer back into the topic like your car veers horribly off the track in this.
Yeah, this show kind of did get a little...
We had to have fun at some point in this show.
I was just thinking, like, this show is following the path about as well as my driving. Instead of describing it, we've just sort of portrayed it metaphorically by veering way off course and crashing into a wall.
Wait, I have a topic to talk about for San Francisco Rush. Here we go.
Okay.
Sometimes when you're careening wildly off the road because you forgot that your accelerator was pressed while trying to turn your wheels, and cars apparently don't move left or right when they're accelerating, you go bouncing down these grass hills into water. And they were like, it's too much work to have this car get submerged in any way, shape, or form. So you bounce off the water like it's Jell-O, but in order to find you on the track, sometimes it will fly under the map and you get to see the underside of the geometry, and then it shoves you back through the road and deposits you to continue racing. And I thought, what a horror show that would be for an actual car driver to be plunged through the planet Earth to just then be shoved back out through the pavement so you can continue driving. How hard is it to make the car vanish below the blue polygon that is representing water? Was the bridge too far?
At least it doesn't just hit the water and explode. Like water explodes, Even Felony 1179, which was made by about 2 people working night shifts from their jobs at the supermarket or whatever. Even that game, if you drove into water, it would show your car sink and it would be like, game over. San Francisco Rush couldn't handle that.
San Francisco Rush, I'm not convinced is an actual game. And I know the arcade game is fun. Was this when Midway was collapsing?
Probably.
And they just had to get something out?
Probably.
We can't live off Mortal Kombat forever, guys. Like I tried earlier, a little positivity. If you could go back in time and be in charge of this port, what would you say to make it not horrid?
It's tough because there are some things that this game clearly did not do well. And it is worse than the arcade version. And I think if you're taking the arcade version of San Francisco Rush and you're taking away the force feedback steering wheel and the driver cockpit cabinet and the subwoofer that you sit on and every thump makes your whole body shake, you're already at a pretty big disadvantage. I don't know that there was a way that this game would have come out good, but it probably could have come out less awful. With some tighter control. There were other racing games on the N64 that came out around this time. Top Gear Rally had come out a month or 2 earlier, and that game's fun. It's not the greatest racing game I've ever played, but it's solid. This game is not, and I don't like it. And I don't have the imaginative capacity to think about how it doesn't turn out awful.
It is a special kind of terrible. And I know a couple people have reached out to us and been like, hey, I bought the game. that you talked about on the show because I liked your talk and I want to play. Don't do that.
No.
If you see a copy of San Francisco Rush, throw it on the ground. Don't stomp on it because the shop urine will probably make you pay for it. Just throw it on the ground and say that's for being garbage.
I don't think I could live with the guilt. Because of this show, someone ran out and bought San Francisco Rush. Like, even if you were like, well, it can't be that bad, or it'll be hilarious because of how bad it... No, no. It's just, there's nothing redeemable about San Francisco Rush.
You'll be mad at us, and then you might write us an email, and we'll be super excited to get an email, and then you're like, you guys suck because you made me buy San Francisco Rush. Let's just head you off at the pass. We are telling you not to buy San Francisco Rush. Don't even emulate it.
No.
It's that bad. Your hard drive will be like, I'm sick and I'm going to crash because this is on my disk.
I'm pretty sure if you download and emulate this game, in 7 days, a car jumps out of your computer and kills you.
Oh, great. I have, 5 days left. Awesome.
Yeah, I guess, the only way to stop it is to get somebody else to play it. And we're warning everybody not to do that, so we're doomed.
Listeners, if you enjoy the show, 2 of you at least have to play this game to save our lives.
Or trick your enemies into it, I guess. Maybe that friend that never called me back to play more GoldenEye at his house, maybe a car came out of his TV and murdered him in the night.
He's just like, I should call Brad. It's pretty fun hanging out with him. Vroom. And his parents like, how did this car get into our family room? It's a Mitsubishi.
It's a nameless generic car that somehow looks strikingly similar to a Pontiac.
And they're just standing there in horror and they hear this voice go, too dangerous. Pots and pans.
That's really what it's warning you when you're on the car selection screen. It's just like, don't play this game. It's dangerous.
I wish they just had Malcolm McDowell. A really low quality video at the beginning of him sitting in a chair saying, "Hi, I'm Malcolm McDowell. This game is trash. Throw it in the trash. Don't play it." All the power of the cartridge thrown behind the most grainy low-res video of just Malcolm McDowell warning you.
I thought of something. We were talking about things that San Francisco Rush would be good for. If you were playing a pickup baseball game and you didn't have any bases, you could probably find a couple copies of San Francisco Rush in a garbage can somewhere and just use them as the bases.
And you encourage everyone to slide into them and just destroy them.
If you had a door that you wanted to prop open, you could probably prop it open with a copy of San Francisco Rush.
If you had a copy of San Francisco Rush that you wanted to throw in San Francisco's Bay, you could do that with San Francisco Rush.
If you were camping somewhere and you didn't have proper facilities, we'll say, and you wanted to designate a space for people to do their business, just put a copy of San Francisco Rush out, kind of a little ways away from your campsite and downwind and downstream or whatever, and just be like, this. Go to the San Francisco Rush and do your business there.
If you had an employee you wanted to fire, you could just hand them a copy of San Francisco Rush, and they would just quit because they know you're a terrible human being.
If you were negotiating a ransom and you needed a ringer briefcase and you had to add some weight to it, you could fill it with copies of San Francisco Rush and give that to the kidnappers. And then when they found out, they'd be even more irritated that they got tricked.
If you're in war and you run out of grenades, you could throw a copy of San Francisco Rush, and just by people being near it, they would lose the will to live.
If you were at a hockey game and a guy scored a hat trick, and you had a really nice hat that you didn't want to throw onto the ice to celebrate, you could throw a copy of San Francisco Rush instead. Or, more appropriately, if a guy on the other team scored a hat trick and you wanted to show your disapproval, you could throw a copy of San Francisco Rush onto the ice.
If you were an executioner on death's row, instead of putting the little electric chair thing on the person, you could just set a copy of San Francisco Rush on their head, and it would be the most inhumane way to put someone out.
If you had someone who really, really, really wronged you and you captured them or whatever, you could just put them in an empty room with a copy of San Francisco Rush and an N64 hooked up to a TV and a gun with one bullet and just kind of wait it out.
If you wanted to make a friend and you went over to their house when they're playing GoldenEye and showed them San Francisco Rush, you could be forever alone.
Oh, all right, you win.
That's going to do it for San Francisco Rush because I need to go wash my eyeballs just thinking about San Francisco Rush. Do you have any final hate to throw on San Francisco Rush?
I think I've gotten pretty much all of it out. This has been a very cathartic episode for me. This is like 20 years of anger and angst just lifted out of my body. But I will offer the challenge up again and make it a little less specific to one person. If you were a magazine writer in the late 90s and you gave San Francisco Rush a good review, I want you to come on this show and try to defend that because I don't think you'll be able to.
And we're not gonna dog on you or anything. We'd be super happy for you to come on the show and talk about the process of what happened with that. Like, have you been thinking about that for the last 20 years? We just excised some demons. Come on the show and excise some demons.
Yeah, I would actually be super excited to actually get to talk to anybody that wrote reviews in that era. Most of them were kind of like people I've looked up to. But having said that, like, you still are going to have to apologize.
That does it for San Francisco Rush. Now, we both will, for a second, think about it one last time and then never again. And in 2049, we will do San Francisco 2049.
If it looks like I'm going to live that long, I'm going to take up smoking and crack and skydiving.
I'll join you.
Yes.
Next week, we wrap up the fall of 97 with our very spooky Halloween episode.
Ooh.
We are going to talk about nightmare creatures. If you want to find us, just flick over to the show notes wherever you are listening to this, and lots of links to do that. With that, I am San Francisco driver Donald, and that has been San Francisco driver Brad.
All right.
And we will see you next week.
It's dangerous! It's dangerous! It's dangerous!